Testing, testing.
I think we're ready tonight. It's about 7 o'clock, so I think it's about time to get going. If you can hear me, wave. Great. Okay, sounds like my video is working. This is our bi-weekly technical MG technical seminar to which you can bring your questions. I have some already that I'm going to answer for people, but this is designed to allow you to work back and forth. There's a chat that you can go to. You can find that. It's on a toolbar on the bottom of your screen. You can go to chat. And you can type stuff into chat, questions for me, and then I'll go ahead and answer those. And then sometimes people will unmute themselves and ask. But just offhand, I'm going to keep everybody muted so there's no background noise. So we've been doing this every 2 weeks. It's been working out well. Our next one is May 9th. I'm going to skip the weekend of Memorial Day. We'll do it May 9th and then again on, or not May, June 9th, and again on June 23rd. So, and I want to thank everyone who has sent along a donation into the PayPal account on my website. That's so very kind. I have not answered everyone. I have not recognized everyone personally yet, but I will. I do mean to, and it's not because it's just because I'm lazy, and I haven't got all of them done. I got most of them done. But anyway, thank you very, very kindly to all you who've offered this stuff up. Let me start off. Craig West from Peoria, Illinois, an old Huey helicopter pilot from Vietnam, is working on a couple MGs simultaneously for the last, I don't know, 5, 10 years. And anyway, so he's drawing some of these projects to a conclusion, and he's been asking me about what compounds to use, what gasket compounds to use, and where. So I thought I'd just hit those briefly. On all the gaskets in the engine, you would use Ultra Black or the Right Stuff. Either of those are better. Ultra Black is an RTV silicone sealant. The Right Stuff is different. It's referred to as elastomeric. I don't know. I'm not an engineer. I don't know what that means. But anyway, those are for use in engines, gearbox, differential. You can also wipe that stuff on the drain plug, on the taper drain plugs in the gearbox and the differential. That'll keep them from weeping. There are some places that you want to use grease as a gasket compound, and that is anything that has to do with water. So the thermostat gasket, the water pump gasket, the heater control gasket, just gob them with grease. Put grease on them, grease on the threads. That means the next time you go to take it off, it'll come off. Now there's 3 other places in the engine where you're going to use grease on one side and the Right Stuff or Ultra Black. These are all Permatex products. On the other side, first of all, is the valve cover gasket. Now on a T-type, you use the Ultra Black or the Right Stuff, and you adhere the gasket to the top of the cylinder head, then paint the top of the gasket with grease. and put the valve cover on it, and then you can take the valve cover on and off 100 times in the future without disturbing anything or hurting anything. The MGA, the midget, the MGC, the MGB are absolutely different from that. MG 1100, I see Tony here. Those are all different from that, and that is that you put the Permatex sealant, the right stuff, between the valve cover and the gasket. Get that set up, and then paint the bottom of the gasket with grease and put it on the cylinder head. And then you can take that on and off 100 times. The other two places that you use it on the engine when you're building the engine is on the sump and on the front timing cover. Now the gasket obviously has two sides. The side that goes to the sump or the side that goes to the timing cover, you use the right stuff. But on the other side, it goes up against the flat metal, in the case of the sump, the bottom of the cylinder block, or the front engine bearing plate, in the case of the timing cover, you put grease there. Why would you do that? So that when you discover that you've put the timing chain on wrong, or you've buggered up something down inside the engine, and you got to take the sump back off, it just drops away, okay? And it won't leak. The grease works fine. What kind of grease? Number 2 grease. In the carburetors, you always use grease. Don't use anything else. No silicone products at all. A little tiny piece of silicone in gasoline grows about that big, and it'll plug up jets, and it's horrible stuff. So you never use any gasket compound on a carburetor except for grease. So that leaves the last one, and that's Permatex. It used to be sold as Permatex Aviation number 2, but it's now just Permatex number 2, and you use that on the cork gaskets on the sending unit on the gas tank. Not a later MGB tank. That's grease, because that's you're dealing with gasoline when you put the ARA 1501 and ARA 1502 seal and ring in and tighten them up to hold the sending unit on the late midgets, the MGCs. But the earlier ones with the cork gasket with the 6 holes that take the 6 5BA screws, you use this goop. It's awful stuff. I mean, you get it on your fingers, it won't come off for 2 days. You've got to scrub. That's Aviation or Permatex number 2. Use it liberally. Use it on the threads of the screws. Use it on both sides of the gasket, and you will be home free. So let me. Oh, good. We've got some stuff. Can you talk about toe in? I will. If you're using silicone gasket, we should not use sealant. Oh, a silicone gasket. You know, I don't know. I've never used those. I'm not a fan of those. So I don't know. Use whatever they tell you to use, or don't use whatever they tell you. Grease is always good because it helps stuff move and settle and move into place. What about the side covers? That's where the right stuff comes in. Now on the rear side cover, that's a thick rubber gasket of some kind on the later model MGBs, and it fits into a channel, so it can't move, it can't slip. So you could use grease in there, you could use anything. I just use some of the right stuff or ultra black. But on the front gasket, on the side cover, never put a thick gasket on there. Always buy the thin gasket that's for the MGA or the 3 main MGB. This is all the way through from the first MGA to the last MGB. Use a thin cork gasket there that's fitted. Moss sells them for the old number was KS809. That was like a BAPGeon number or something. Anyway, put the right stuff on both sides of that and put it on the cover and put it in, and don't over torque it, because if you over torque it, the gasket sometimes under pressure will start to slide sideways and open up. So on the side covers, absolutely. What do I put between the front plate and the engine block on a TD? The right stuff. I wish it was like 911 or 939 or something, the right stuff. It's an awful name. Has anyone used the steel reinforcing system on MGB sumps? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. What you do on the and I've got a YouTube video up about this. On the sump and on the timing cover, you take a little tiny ball peen hammer. Sometimes they're called gasket hammers because you can make gaskets with them. You put the ball peen against the hole in the sump. So you got the hammer here, and you strike that hammer with another hammer and drive where that's been drawn up. You drive it back down again. So now you've got the gasket around the sump with the right stuff on one side and grease on the other, and you tighten up the 23 sump bolts on the MGB, and you get them all going, and the bolt comes up and hits this and then draws it up because you dented it, the hole here. It draws it up, and that means that the area between the holes gets really tight too. So that's what I've done. Front plate on the TD, okay. So we've talked about that. Teflon tape, you could use that on a drain plug. I haven't. Banjo bolts, remember that those are not, the threads aren't involved with the leaking. They're involved with the compression of the copper washers. However, the ball that fits on, like on the top of the oil cooler, dab that up with grease because you want to be able to have it slip around and move as you're tightening it down. So twice this week, people have called me and said, I was doing a brake job on both of them TFs, doing a brake job on my TF, and I'm trying to loosen the left front nut. And I'm heaving it. Finally, it comes off. But it's a left-hand thread. So they've ruined the nut. Well, that's easy. You can buy a new nut. The problem is they ruined the stub axles. So it's a left-hand 5/8 BSF thread. It's like, where are you going to get a die from that? Well, I happen to have one, but oh my gosh! Remember on MGAs and T-types that the nut on the front hub tightens in the direction of wheel rotation. Well, so does it on the right-hand side, but that's a right-hand thread on the right-hand side. But on the left-hand side, it's a left-hand thread, and that goes for the banjo rear axle also. The hexagonal nuts on a midget or the octagonal nuts on the MGA or the banjo MGB diff tighten in the direction of wheel rotation. So you bugger up the rear axle. That's big. That's big time. I get a die for that too. But I don't have the left-hand die. I got the right-hand die for the right-hand side. So anyway, just be really cautious taking those apart. Two of them, and I had a bunch of those, and Forrest may still have them at the Rusty Moose Garage. I don't know. I usually send people to Paul Deershaw at Sports Car Craftsman in Arvada, Colorado, because he's got such a wonderful supply of stuff. I don't know how much T-type stuff he's got, but he's for MGB, MGA stuff. If he's got it, he knows he's got it, and he'll send it to you today or tomorrow. It's you're not waiting 2 weeks and then call the guy up who promised that he'd send it to you and ask him why you haven't got it yet, and then so he couldn't find a box, his dog got sick, or Paul will send it out today or tomorrow. He's a really good guy. Sports Car Craftsman, Arvada, Colorado, Denver. I had another guy call me. He had an MGB gearbox that was falling out of fourth gear. Third gear, okay. I've seen them fall out of third. Very often that's a problem with the gear shift boot. You move the gear shift forward into third, and the boot that you've purchased is a little too small, and you've got it a little too snug, and it's always pulling on the gear lever, and it pulls it out. It wants to pull it out of gear. But fourth gear, I can't imagine why it's falling out of fourth, nor can I imagine how to fix it. So I told him, I said, well, the only thing you can do now, because he's already got it back in the car, is loosen up the bolt on top of the detent on the selector rail. Take that out, put in a couple of number 8 lock washers, helical lock washers, to act as a spacer and tighten up the spring so the detent falls into the notch in the selector rail and holds it more firmly than it did otherwise. So he told me today, he said he was on MG Experience, good place, and someone said, oh, you got to use 3 synchro springs because they're a 1/4 inch longer or something or other. And I'm thinking, those springs are pretty tight in there. I can't believe there's an extra 1/4 inch of collapse allowed. But hey, I don't know. I never tried that. I only tried shimming the existing springs. But anyway, that's something you want to do always on a gearbox rebuild, is to shim those springs. The balls on the MGA, the balls on the T-type, well, those springs are massive. But you add an extra ball on a T-type on first gear. If you want to know how to do it, contact me later, and I'll talk to you about first gear falling out of first on a T-type, TD, TF. But always add those extra shims, because you can do it later. Man, your hand's got to be about that big, and you reach down between the top of the gearbox and the bottom of the gearbox tunnel and try to get this thing loose. It's a bitch. It's awful. So
what about that little plastic bushing at the bottom of the shift lever?
Well, that's got to be there. You mean the 22H15 gear lever bushing, the one that you can't get in? Oh my gosh, those could take, sometimes you put it in, it just goes in, it just goes in. Other times you can sit there for 10 minutes, pull it out. And of course, I've always got it gobbed with grease, and so you get it straight, and you put it back in there. If you get mad and get a hammer and hit the top of the gear lever, it just pops through, and the bushing does not seat into the right place. But no, that's not the problem here. That'll cause your gear shift to wallow. It's horrible. It's always an indicator that someone hasn't been complete when you get in the car and you go to shift it, and the gear lever's moving 2 inches, all the way around. But that bushing's important in there. So the big one that I had, those are all just the little ones. The big one that I had was clutch hydraulics, MGB clutch hydraulics. And I talked to the guy again this morning. I've talked to him maybe 3 times. He's from California. And he bought a new master and a new slave and a new hose. And then he was twisting the steel line out of the hose and wasn't paying attention or something or other, and snapped the steel line. So now he's got all 4 new pieces. Puts them all in, can't get it bled, won't bleed. Okay? He can't get the air out of the system. So I talked to him about using a clear tube into a bottle, like they show you in the workshop manual. And then, you open the bleeder and your associate depresses the pedal. And then you can see the fluid come out in that clear tube, and you can see if it's pure fluid or if it's aerated. If it's aerated, the clutch won't work, because those little bubbles will collapse under pressure. So anyway, he couldn't get rid of the bubbles. So finally, I said, well, look, there's only so many connections in the whole system. It's a closed hydraulic circuit. You got the joint between the slave and the hose. It's got a copper washer there. You got a joint between the hose and the line. You got a joint between the line and the banjo on the back of the master cylinder. And you've got a banjo bolt and 2 copper washers on the banjo. 2, he says. So bingo, that's it. So he feels around underneath the new master cylinder, finds that washer that had dropped out, takes it all back apart again from underneath the dash with a 5/8 socket and the flex, and gets it all into place, goes to bleed it again. Now all the air's gone, the clutch still doesn't work. And I know some people have talked to me before about some of the new master cylinders and something about the length of the push rod, and you end up down on the floor before the master cylinder is completely emptied. So one guy sent me a nice picture. He'd taken the push rod and extended it, but you gotta have, you gotta be able to weld. I mean, there's a lot of skill in extending the push rod on the master cylinder. I told him you can take your original cylinder, send it to White Post Restorations. I don't know how much it is. I'm just guessing that it's probably 150 bucks. They have it brass sleeved and rebuilt, and you get it back. It looks great, and it's the one that was in the car to begin with a reservoir that you don't have to fill up after each bleed. Those new ones, the reservoirs only take a couple tablespoons of brake fluid, it seems. Anyway, so we talked about that, and we're going through, and he said, all the bubbles are out. And I said, well, sometimes because of the position of the bleeder in the bleed hole in the slave, on some of the slaves, if you take your hand and after it's all bled, open the bleeder and push the arm and the push rod and the piston into the slave, it will disgorge any air that was caught at the top of the slave cylinder. And he called me back and he goes, that was it. That was it. So he'd gone through, I don't know, a quart or two of brake fluid, all the favors that his wife would ever hope to give him, sitting there, depressing the pedal. So if you run into a snag, there's all kinds of stuff that can go wrong. But there's only 4 things in that system: a master, the line, the hose, and the slave. So you got to be able to get the air out. So anyway, that takes care of what I'm talking about. So I'm going to take a look here on the side and see what, can you talk about how to set the toe in alignment using the string method on a 64B? Not intelligently. What we did, we had a pipe. You don't need a pipe, but you need something that you can make an adjustment. And we had a pipe and 2 uprights that came about, can't see. I don't know, must have come up 10 inches or so, flanges on the bottom of this assembly, and pointers that came in, and one of the pointers was threaded, and we could bring it up behind the tire and brush it against the high point on the tire, and then take it out and bring it around and put it at the front of the tire, and again see if the when I put my hands parallel, they don't look parallel on the camera, but you're looking for just a tiny little toe in up front, 1/16 of an inch, 32nd of an inch, unless you're discussing it in side slip per mile, and I don't know how many feet that is. Nobody uses that anymore anyway. But there's 2 different string methods. One is to run a string on the back axle and run it straight up against the front wheel. This is sort of like a 3-person operation. Somebody's holding it around the back of the rear wheel, someone's holding it around the front of the front wheel, and you make sure that the string touches all 4 surfaces of the tire, each tire having two surfaces. But I take it someplace. Now, if you're working at home and you're using the string method, or you're using some wood or something rather to come up with an alignment of the wheels, between every adjustment, you've got to push the car back and then bring it forward about 20 feet so that the wheels assume a natural position, unless you take like 6 pieces of wax paper and you put them underneath the tire. Now the tire can pivot on wax paper. Okay, you don't have to roll the car back and forth. I never used that method myself, but I've talked to people who have. We always had plenty of room in the shop, and there was always enough people to push the car, even if the brakes were dragging a little bit. So the string method, I can't speak to that because I didn't use that. So let's see, side covers, 68 mgb. It idles great, and then it doesn't. Will idle great at a light for 20 seconds, and then it idles down and kills.
That's it.
Okay, Mr. Boyd. All right. So So the first thing to do, is go onto my website, universitymotorsltd.com, and there's a section along the top ribbon there that says forms. And you come down to the form that says tune-up, MGB dual carburetor tune-up. And you follow each thing on that list, and when you're all done, the car will run perfectly. It has to. But more to your thing here. It's probably not the quality of the gasoline. It's not the valve lash. It's not the spark plugs. It has something to do with the mixture. And the first thing to do is to take spray carburetor cleaner, and the little tube that comes out of the carb cleaner. We're going to use a pencil. Yeah. It's a demonstration. And with a car idling, crank the idle screws up until it idles fast enough so it doesn't kill, and spray between the head and the manifold, and the heat shield, and the spacer blocks and carburetors around the throttle shafts, and see if you can get the engine RPM to change dramatically. If it changes dramatically, either up or down, it's because there's a vacuum leak. And if there's a vacuum leak, you can't tune the carburetor. Now, there's always leaks around the shafts. There always are. And that doesn't cause quite as many problems as a leak between the head and manifold, but just check for leaks first and just see what you got going on. My guess is that the mixture is wrong. Okay, that's just a guess. And if you get the mixture right, it's going to want to idle correctly. Now, when you're idling, you should always have your foot off the clutch. The only time your foot should be on the clutch is when you're starting up or when you're changing gears. Start the car in neutral, idle it in neutral, stoplight, stop sign, stop, start traffic, put the car in neutral, let it freewheel. Okay, never have your foot on the clutch. But sometimes when you do go to put your foot down on the clutch, the engine slows down a lot. It shouldn't. That's right. It shouldn't. It should be making enough energy that it can overcome that drag that's imposed when you push that carbon thrust bearing against the pressure plate. Yeah. But my guess is it's probably mixture. But most carburetors are timing problems. So I'm always adamant, and everyone here except for the twin cam owner, all of our timing is the same. It's 32 degrees before top dead center at full mechanical advance, which is usually up around 3,000-4,000 RPM, vacuum disconnected. So some of our cars have got enough timing marks, you can fiddle around and do it, but almost always you need a dial back timing light. So you can set the timing at 8 degrees at idle, or 14 degrees at idle, or 15 degrees at 1,500 RPM. But all that presupposes that the springs in the distributor are acting correctly, and they're not. I mean, a 1950 TD is 70 years old, so the springs in there are shot. Now you can send a distributor off to one of two places: Jeff Schlemmer at Advanced Distributor in Minnesota. He's got a nice website. Or to Rob Medinsky at British Vacuum Unit. He's in New Hampshire, I think, or Connecticut. Two different ends of the country, not ends, or Minnesota's sort of the top end. I know Schlemmer's always behind at this time of the year. It's just the time to send your distributor in is like October, when you're not going to drive it. But anyway, when you get back a distributor that's acting correctly, the car will run a whole lot better. It just does run a whole lot better. I'm not an advocate of buying a new distributor. Advanced curves that are just all over the board. You just don't even know what kind of advanced curve, and one distributor matched up against another doesn't have the same advanced curve. So it's important that the advance is correct for your car. But anyway, set it at 32, dial back timing light. 68B, you got to crawl on your belly like a snake down there. And you got to trust somebody up above to rev it up. And of course, it sounds like the engine's going to blow up. It's running so fast. But all the time you're moving your finger up, like go faster, go faster, go faster. And the timing mark moves, and finally it ceases moving. When it ceases moving, that's full mechanical advance. So then you put your hand up, and then the guy lets the idle come back down. Okay. On a 72 through 80 MGB, or on an MGC, you can do it from the top because the timing marks are on a T-type.
Right.
The marks are on the top, you know, but for whatever reason on that B-series engine, they decided the timing mark should be at 6 o'clock. I hope the guy that moved them up to 11 o'clock in 1972 got a handsome bonus. Oh my God.
Disable vacuum.
Disable vacuum, absolutely. Disconnect the vacuum, yep. So that's 32 degrees at full mechanical advance, vacuum disconnected. TC through 1980 MGB, they're all the same. It has to do with the construction of the cylinder head and the basic ratio of the diameter of the square of the engine having to do with the bore and the stroke, but 32 is correct. So let's see. All right, so here we got Tom Snook. I forgot to put his note on there, and he sent me a note earlier. And Tom said he wants to restore an MGA so he can drive it anywhere. What improvements should you make? There aren't any. Just do it all correctly and do it all right at the get-go, and then carry with you a complete extra distributor. You can get a new one, put it in a bag, wires, everything. Just put it, you know, and then if your distributor fails for whatever reason, you pull it out, put it in, and another fuel pump, and of course the tools to fit them. There's no point in having a distributor or a fuel pump, not having the tools to fit them. That's about it. I've campaigned my MGA for I don't know. I've changed the speedometer too many times. I can't tell you how many hundreds of thousands of miles that I have on my MGA, and I've been off the road. Let's see, 3 summers ago, I was off the road twice in 3 weeks because my Pertronics failed. Now, I'm a believer in Pertronics. I like them. The distributor guys, when you send them to Schlemmer or Medinsky, they don't like them. There's some problems at real high speed, but nobody's driving at $6,000. Well, I don't know, we may have some racers here, but that race stuff is different. But just regular old points. Regular old points is what they like. But anyway, I had Pertronics and I lost 2 units in rapid succession, so I'm not very keen on them myself, but I still, I don't know, something about my car, I don't know, I got straight spark plug wires, but you can buy another round headlight. You don't need headlights. You should carry a fan belt, you know, because you can get a fan belt at Napa, but that means you got to get to Napa. So carry the fan belt and a fuel pump and a distributor. And, you know, I drove from Grand Rapids. My late wife, Caroline, and I drove from here to Grapevine, Texas, and back 2,400 miles in 7 days. So, and the guys who campaign their MGAs, Marshall and Liz and Lee Niner, I met up with them when they were going to Solvang, California in the summer of, I don't know, what was that, 16? You know, and they'd driven from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean in their MGAs. Some people will say, well, maybe you should put an alternator in. No, maybe. Carry an extra generator, you know, carry an extra generator. I don't have on my list on my forms your trip pack, all the stuff that you should take. It was written so long ago that I have you should take a roll of quarters to feed the payphone. Sorry, that's dated information, but you can still use them in the quarter car wash. So I just, you know, things like taper bearings up front or Molly this or just all the original stuff's great. It's just great. The cars, you know, you talk to people, they bought their car new, they're in the Navy, you know, they got transferred from one fleet to another fleet. They drove across the country 4 times in it, you know, and it worked great when it was new. So if your MGA is new, it'll work great too. Sorry, I don't have any, you know, like, why are you not a fan of silicone? It says Icon, but silicone gasket, I don't know about them, and I don't think they're necessary. And they're like, you know, they're always expensive. The T-type valve cover gaskets always leaked. Oh my gosh, they always leaked. Now Moss has got these nice, big, thick cork gaskets. They're great. And Moss sells great valve cover gaskets for the MGB. They're nice and thick and they work. I've never used them because the silicone gaskets are 26 bucks or something or other, and cork ones work just fine. That to me. So, and I'm still not sure what the reinforcing system is on the MGB sumps. I've seen scrapers that run real close to the crank, and the idea is to pull the oil off the crankshaft. But I don't know what the reinforcement. Okay, Tracy and John, can you explain why my early TD would shake violently when climbing an incline in reverse? Well, it's like the old story, Doc, it hurts when I lift my arm. What can I do? Is it, don't lift your arm, How about going up that incline forward? Anyway, you're backing into your driveway. The problem with a T-type is that you've got two mechanical linkages, one that runs the clutch, one that runs the throttle. So if the engine moves, it's going to change the throttle position. Okay, and also if you're just sitting still and you look at the gear lever itself and depress the clutch and watch the gear lever, it's not uncommon on a T-type to have it move to the rear as you press that pedal because the whole system is strained. So you couple all that with the this old-fashioned tie down that they have in the T-types. I mean, how complicated is a V mount to hold an engine in a frame? It's like we are at the end of automotive. I mean, from here on out, it's all electrics and stuff. But all this stuff's been experimented with, so that on a T-type, you've got a flat mount with a great big engine up here, and if it's putting 45 horsepower in torque down the back, it's putting 45 horsepower in the opposite direction. The engine wants to move in the opposite direction. So the engine moves around a lot, except for the stabilizer that's in the front. So usually if you take a T-type engine and wiggle it back and forth, it moves. It moves some. Very few of them are really rigid. So a combination of all that, as you begin to back up, the engine moves, the throttle increases, so then the engine moves, so the throttle decreases, so then the engine moves, the throttle increases, and it's a harmonic. So you can take care of that by stabilizing the engine.
Okay.
Sometimes it's the clutch. No, you don't want to hear that. But you always do the cheapest, easiest stuff first. And taking care of that stabilizer on the front of the T-type is not easy. Take the bonnet off, take the radiator out, take the fan blades off. I mean, it's just easier. It's just easier. You cannot get to the bushings that hold that stabilizer in place without doing that. So anyway, so that's why. All
Okay,
right.
thanks.
Okay, so the next one we got from John Chershak. On my MGA 1500, after driving 30 to 40 miles, the engine hiccups as if the engine has no spark. It happens for a second and then it runs smooth. And he's got electronic ignition, so it's probably not that. There's a particular fault that evidences itself in what you might call a hiccup or a cough. The engine, especially on a slight incline, not on the straight, and not when you're going up a hill with your foot in the throttle, but just a slight incline, and the car will go like it does when it's stone cold and you haven't got it choked enough. And it's hiccuping for two reasons. Either it's too lean or it's too retarded. So we already talked about the 32 degrees. That's a fixed number. So check the timing, and then just for fun, enriching the carburetors. Just enriching both the carburetors half a turn, for instance. Now you can take the spark plugs out, and you can take a look at the spark plugs. They should neither be black, sooty black, nor should they be as white as a piece of notebook paper, bone white. One's too rich, one's too lean. They should be the color of your Class A's from your Army days. Nice khaki tan color. That's the color that a plug should be if it's firing correctly. But it may be that you take the plugs out and you find that they're on the light side, on the whiter side, and it's because it's been running too lean. But get the timing sorted out, enriching it just a little bit. That should probably take care of it. I don't think it's the distributor. It sounds like a heat issue, you know, after driving 30 or 40 miles. So, okay. Says, here we go. Oh, okay, Kevin Jacques, I gave up on that damned bushing after an hour of fooling around. Oh, I can live with the moving gear selector. Yeah, that's thing. So anyway, so take the new bushing, which isn't exactly a cylinder, it's got a tapered end to it, and take it over to your grindstone and put a greater taper on it. Just cheat. Put a greater taper on that bushing, and then put some grease on it. And first you got to get the console out. I don't remember what year you had, but you got to get the console out of the way and the gear lever boot out of the way. And, oh my gosh, a lot of trouble. But anything that the driver touches in driving the car should be firm. If you've only got one window winder in your MGB, it should be on the driver's side. You know, the brake pedal and the clutch pedal shouldn't move back and forth. They shouldn't have fore and aft movement. The steering wheel shouldn't move up and down or have rotational free play. Everything that the driver handles should be nice and firm. So you put your seatbelt on and strap yourself in so you're one with the vehicle, and then your four limbs are free to run all the controls. And it just feels so much better when everything's okay. So just put a little taper on that 22H15 bushing. Rich Caldwell, you advised me to modify the MGA front frame extension to accept the sway bar. I almost did this, but took a look at my 1600 and noted that the sway bar is mounted to the bottom of the front frame extension, and I believe it works fine. It may. I don't know. That's the way that you do T-types, so that the link comes up and then the sway bar comes down at quite an angle. So that could work. But rather than modifying that front frame extension yourself, here we are back to Paul Deershaw at Sports Car Craftsman in Arvada, Colorado. He does a lot of MGA framework and that front web assembly that comes out on the MGA that holds the front bumper that sits in front of the rack and pinion. He can take your old one and change it so that it'll indent it and drill it so it'll accept the sway bar. And since the one car is all apart, Rich, down to the frame, I'd go ahead and put it on like it's supposed to be on top.
John, the sway bar that I can get out of Florida, which is on back order, which I think is what Moss sells, they all mount to the bottom of that frame extension. The one that Cecilia has mounts over it in that little
MGB.
cutout.
You get an MGB. You get an MGB sway bar. It fits right in. The MGB. Paul Deershaw's got lots of used ones. So it's just an MGB, and there's two thicknesses. There's a 9/16 and a 5/8. They use the 5/8 on the GT. They use the 5/8 on the 77s through 80s. Those have got longer links on them though, but you can use MGB links and an MGB sway bar. I just put one on Liz Tenike's MGA Mark II last fall. So big project. Bumper comes off. Front splash, the front splash apron comes off. The web assembly comes off. Oh my God, what a project. But your car is all apart. I know it is. So this is the perfect opportunity to do it correctly. Paul can advise you on that too. So, but I do know that the T-types, the T-types run it on the bottom of on a T-type, they're called dumb irons. So they're mounted on the bottom there. From Jim Nybert, I've got a 74.5 MGB GT. So the 74.5, remember that in 74 is the longest production year they had. They started making them in September of '73, and they had chrome bumpers with the standard chrome overriders with a little strip of rubber on the front. Then starting in January of 1974, they put the big block overriders on that in England are called Sabrina. Look, when you're done with this, look up Sabrina. It's like there's no, I call them Dolly Parton, but Sabrina's got Dolly Parton beat altogether. And anyway, they're called Sabrina overriders. And then beginning in September of '74, they raised the ride height and put a rubber bumper on the front, but kept the dual HIF carburetors and the brake master cylinder that's common with the earlier ones. Beginning in January '75, that's where the real 75 came out. So there are very few 74.5 MGB GT, very few of them. Anyway, Jim writes and says the previous owner installed a stainless steel exhaust. From within the car, it's loud with a deep roar. From the exterior, it sounds similar to his Roadster. Would installing a mild steel help with the noise? Maybe, but make sure that exhaust doesn't touch the frame anywhere. If it touches the frame, oh my gosh, there's just a huge rumble that comes up from there, just enormous rumble. So just make sure that you're totally isolated from the frame of the car, because it can touch in all kinds of places. I just bought one of those stainless steel systems for my MGA, and I haven't run it more than a minute. So I don't know. I know they're not quite as silent as the old Harmo. That was a British aftermarket that was muffler that was purchased by Walker. But the old Harmo systems and the original systems were pretty quiet. So I don't know, maybe mild steel would do it. I'm not sure, but first of all, check and make sure. And sometimes it's interesting to go find somebody else in your area who's got the same vehicle and drive that. You know, the BGT had a lot of foam rubber stuffed all around the back end, so much so that it caused the bodies to rust out underneath the taillights. All that is jammed in there to suck up the noise because you're in a trapped container, and of course any noise in there is louder than it would be seemingly louder than it would be in the Roadster. So anyway, those are some ideas. Find somebody else who's got a GT and go out and drive it and see if it makes the same noise, see if it's touching the frame. I don't know. Go on the MG Experience. Of course, when you go on MG Experience, I mean, everyone here has been on it. I advertise these sessions on it, but you end up posting a question. My right front wheel squeaks. What could be the problem? And, oh my gosh, I mean, 400 people weigh in and all kinds of ideas, from wheel bearings to spokes to brake rotors to all kinds of stuff. And then somebody says, oh, well, mine was doing that, but that same day my wife bought a cat, and then mine doesn't squeak anymore, so maybe you should buy a cat. And then somebody else writes in and says, not another friggin' cat thread, so you got to wade through a lot of chaff to get to the truth on MG Experience. There are people who post up there who are very, very good. I don't post up there because I got enough stuff going on. If you have questions, you can call me. Except about whether mild steel is going to be quieter. I don't know. All right, here we've got any issues replacing a 1979 MGB rear axle. I'm sure that's what you mean. With a 72 rear axle to convert to wire wheels. The 79 is steel wheels. So if you take the 79 and simply put hubs on it, just put hubs on it for the wire wheels, sometimes it works out okay. Now, that means that the wheels are pushed outwards by 3/4 of an inch on each side. And sometimes, either because of where the mounts are mounted for the leaf springs, or the fact that lots of leaf springs have a curve to them, it sets the rear axle, for whatever reason, off to the left. So when you install wire wheels on a steel wheel rear axle, sometimes you end up with the same amount of space, like 2 fingers, between the inside of the outer wheel arch and the rear tire on both sides. If you're there, hey, you're home free. You don't have to do anything else. But more often, you end up with almost interference on one side and like 3 fingers on the other, because the body's not sitting on the rear axle in the same place. In that case, when you go over a bump and the car comes down on the rear wheel, the inner edge of the wheel arch is going to cut into the wheel. Can't have that. So, and if you're, sometimes it looks pretty good, and if you only weigh 125 pounds, it's great. But if you're running 275, the car's going to move a lot and sit down on that, and therefore you have to change the rear axle. Now, the problem in changing a 72 rear axle to a 79 rear axle is that there's a rear anti-sway bar. You can just take it off. Okay. But if you want to put it on, which is, why not? It's there. It makes the car handle a whole lot better. That means you've got to grind the mounts off the 79 rear axle, put them on to get the 72 rear axle all mounted up, get the sway bar into place, have everything sitting there except not have these stanchions attached, welded to the rear axle yet, but let them find their own position. Once everything's all assembled and you found their own position, then you can weld them up. But of course you can't see well enough to weld them, so you have to just tack them in a couple of spots and then drop the axle back out again and complete the welds on both edges of those stanchions. So see if the wire wheels fit first. And that's the same on all the cars, not on T-types, but on the MGAs and MGBs. The disc wheel rear axles are 1.5 inches wider overall, which pushes the wheels out. That's the problem in doing this.
Hey, so, John, couldn't I just have both axles out and sort of line the 79 up with the 72 and take those pedestals off, if you will? And
I wouldn't.
Use
no, because I mean, you could be off 1/4 inch real easily. You just could, because how are you going to hold the axles in place and the tipping? And just if you're gonna weld those stanchions on, do it correctly. And it's just a real problem. It just takes longer. That's all. But do it right. Okay. Because if you get one of them angled or they're not, it's hard with this camera. Not the same, or both of them are too far forward, and the axle wants to sit back here instead of on top of it. What are you going to do? Take it back off, cut them off. That's what we used to do at the shop, and that's why we had. You'd look for that rear axle. Of course, if you're close to Denver, Colorado, Paul probably has a rear axle there. Probably not a wire wheel rear axle. Those are in higher demand.
All right, thanks, John.
Okay, Kevin Jacques again. I missed where to find this tune-up guide. And if you go on my website, universitymotorsltd.com, there's a ribbon across the top of the website, and it's like our story and recent projects. Let me tell you, none of them are recent. They're all from a long time ago, and in resources and stuff like that. But one of them says forms. One of the little icons there says forms, and you go on to forms. It's got the complete lube, and it's got all the tune-up information. It doesn't have the trip pack. So when I talk to my gal who does my website, maybe I'll get the trip pack up there, the tools to carry and so forth. Okay, you're welcome. Tony Caputo, using a quick jack lift system for my 76 midget, where's the best sturdy point towards the front of the vehicle? or is the best lift point towards the front of the vehicle to the rear of the front wheels? There's a frame section that comes down. It's about that wide. How can you tell? And it's like that wide or this wide? And it's got a triangular hole in it, and that comes down and comes underneath the car, so you can go right in there. So it's maybe 6 inches, 8 inches to the inside of the front wheel at the rear of the front wheel arch. That's a pretty good spot. So you can jack it up there. We usually just use the tray underneath the front pulley. And when you've got a trolley jack, you've got a paddle, and the paddle's got those 4 fingers on it. So you get the 2 fingers, 2 of those fingers, and you get it up on the back side of that platform that runs wheel to wheel underneath there, so that as you're jacking it, it doesn't pull off. So let me just say a few words about jacking. Jacks are for jacking, jack stands are for holding. So you jack the car up and then you put jack stands underneath it. You want to leave the jack underneath it too, sure, fine, but don't work on the car with just the jack. There was a movie that came out, sort of a grade B in 1972, maybe called Toolbox Murders, and the the trailer had somebody turning the handle on the jack and it coming down on the guy. Anyway, it's creepy. So when you're jacking, you want to have the car in neutral, absolutely in neutral. You don't want to have it in gear. You don't even want to have it in gear when it's up on jack stands. No. Leave it in neutral. Well, won't the car slide backwards? I mean, look at it. It's on an angle. And you jack the front end up. Does it want to move backwards? No. That's like putting a smaller front wheel on your bicycle and thinking that you're always pedaling downhill. It's going to be easier. It doesn't work like that. So always make sure that the floor is absolutely clean. The wheels will go over a bolt, but the trolley jack won't go over a speck of sand. So sweep before you use the trolley jack, and make sure the trolley jack is well oiled, because as you're jacking the car up, the trolley jack is coming up on a radius and the car is coming up on a radius. And if the car gets stuck and the trolley jack gets stuck, it'll come apart. And in the case of an MGB, then you support the entire weight of the car on the bottom of the radiator. I've done that a couple of times. It's really embarrassing. And it's radiator time. So just make sure the floor is nice and clean. And you don't leave it in gear after you've got up. You want to chuck the wheels, that's fine. Put the handbrake on, okay. But don't put it in gear, because as soon as you put it in gear, you're going to touch the starter solenoid and it's going to go, and it's going to jump off the jack stands. That's happened to me too. So I've been here. I've been here. I know the pitfalls here. So jacks are for jacking, jack stands. Anyway, that's it. And when you get the car up in the air, stand up, grab hold of the car, and shake it violently. If it falls off the jack stands, a whole lot better that it falls off while you're standing next to it than when you're underneath it with a breaker bar, tugging it at something, all of a sudden it pops off a jack stand. So anyway. All right, the MGB reinforcement system. This is Mike M. Is sold on eBay. It's standoffs that are installed under the bolts at the front and rear of the pan, no longer than flat plates are laid across these standoffs. The theory is that the front and rear surfaces of the sump are dimpled, and using the system provides a more uniform flat clamp load. So that must be to reduce oil leaks.
Yes, it is, John.
Okay, but you can do that anyway when you're building the engine. You get those little square blocks or rectangular blocks of cork that run along there, and you put the front and rear engine bearing plates on, and that causes those corks to sort of pop up. Well, take your carpet knife, your utility knife, and just trim along it and trim that down, and then fill it full of the right stuff, and it won't leak. So All right, my MGB with HIF carburetors runs too rich. Doesn't seem to make any difference when I adjust the screws on the sides of the carburetors, and it just doesn't seem to adjust. So fuel can enter an HIF throat two different ways. It can come up through the jet, like all the other carburetors, between the I can't angle between the jet and the needle. It comes out of there, but there's another path, another tube on an HIF carburetor that's got a rotary valve on it, and that's done for the choke. And it isn't a choke. A choke is this. Okay, it's not a choke. It's a mixture control, but everybody calls it a choke. So the rotary choke on the HIF carburetor leaks, and when it leaks, it'll suck fuel into the airflow. So is yours leaking or not? Here's the way to find out. Take both suction chambers off, springs and air pistons. Okay, put those off to the side. Take the line that goes from the front of the front to the rear carburetor and over to the charcoal canister. Take that off the carburetor. And take a length of tubing that you can put in your mouth and put on the vent. Let's say we're going to do the front carburetor first. So you push it on the fitting, the tube on the carburetor vent, and you puff into it with your mouth. But you don't have an incandescent light bulb hanging underneath the bonnet, because you'll get a stream of gasoline, depending on how hard you puff, that can go up 4 feet. So just lightly puff, and you'll see gasoline shoot up out of the jet. Okay, all right, that's cool. So take your index finger and put it on the jet. Put it on the jet. Now blow into that hose so strongly that you see stars. I mean, like really, really blow. Don't use your air compressor. Just blow. So there are 2 holes behind the main jet. The one in line with the main jet is the emulsion tube. We're not looking at that one. We're looking at the one that's offset. And if you see gasoline bubbling up out of there, so you get confused, which hole, then operate the choke. Operate the choke while you're blowing on it, and you'll see the gasoline just wash out of that, just burble up out of that hole. And that's the choke. So usually what happens is the number 14 O-ring has failed. Those are on the side of the carburetor. And you want to replace those with Viton number 14 O-rings. Do that, take care of the problem. So it's really common. But check first. You always do the simplest, easiest stuff first. So just check. And there's a chance that the floats are not adjusted correctly. There's a chance that the floats are no longer floats, they're sinks, and the gasoline level's way up too high. I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities. But this is a first, almost non-invasive method of checking. And so just put some pressure on those guys. And if you get confused about what to do, I probably have a YouTube video up about it. I don't remember. I still haven't got those indexed. Don't know if I ever will. We've all had 2 months to catch up on stuff. So anyway, that's the way to find out if those are rotary. And then if they are bad, you got to take the carburetors off and go in there and change those O-rings. At the same time, change the needles and seats and check the floats and check the float height and everything, because you're going to be off the car. So. All right, let's see. Oh, I did the extra taper, the grease. It was a fight. Kevin, what were we talking about? The extra taper, the grease. Extra taper.
The transmission bushing, the shift rod bushing.
Yes, okay. I blanked. All right, yes, all right. So from John H., that's my middle initial. That bushing is a big pain, but it's doable with a lot of cursing. So I failed, but we all know that's inherent in the male species. The more you swear, at least the less it hurts. It hurts, less it hurts physically, or the less it hurts your psyche. And there's a lot of good words that you can pull out. And if you can't find them, watch a British video, because they've got even better words. So, All right. See, on my 1970 with HS4s, it runs great. But downhill, it's been popping now that it's getting warmer. When it was cooler, but not when it was cooler. Which way to adjust the carburetor? Okay. So what we're talking about is a backfire, a literal backfire. But there are two different types of backfires. One's a pa-pa-pa-pa-pa-pa-pa coming out the tailpipe when you're decelerating. And the other one is a rifle shot, which is a true, honest-to-goodness backfire that you'd experience if you had a bad condenser or something or other, where flames come out of the tailpipe that far. But that popping is because you're spilling unburned fuel down the tailpipe. Now, there's no way to get away from unburned fuel, because when you're running down the road at 60 miles an hour and take your foot off the gas, or you're going downhill and you take your foot off the gas, so little air-fuel mixture gets into the cylinders that it doesn't combust. It just doesn't. It can't. There's not enough of it there. So it goes right out the exhaust valve and right into the exhaust. If there's a leak in the exhaust, if there's any kind of leak in the exhaust, it'll suck fresh air in and complete the combustion inside the exhaust system. So that's the popping. So the first thing to do is find the leak in the exhaust. So take a handful of wet rags, get a 5-gallon pail, dip the rags in the pail, have your buddy, you just let the car idle, have your buddy hold those rags up against the ass end of the exhaust so the whole exhaust system pressurizes, and just you're down on the ground on a creeper, you're crawling, I don't know, and you're listening. You can hear it. You can hear it hissing wherever it's leaking. Can't tell you where that might be, but there's a leak someplace in the exhaust. That's why it's popping. Okay, so it may be the mixture, it may be something else, but more often than not, it's a leak in the exhaust. So this is a real problem with the smogged cars with the air pumps on them, because they pump so much fresh air into the exhaust system that combustion continues to occur, you know, during that period of deceleration. So that's my guess. But the question about adjusting the carburetor, look at the carburetor and operate the choke. Operate the choke by hand from underneath, and you'll see the jets drop. That makes it unbelievably rich. So when the jets come down, it's rich. So you take the adjuster nut, the 3/8 British flat nut, with a 3/8 British standard brass thread on. It's 26 threads per inch. Unscrew that nut, and as you unscrew that nut, it moves the jet down and makes it richer. Or when you screw the nut up, it pushes the jet up against the needle and changes its position. Now that's 26 threads per inch. That means out of 40 turns, approximately, you get an inch movement. So each turn is 40 thousandths of an inch. And you've got 6 flats. So 6 into 40 is about 6, 7. So each flat that you turn that nut changes the position of the jet by 6 or 7 thousandths. It ain't much, but that when you come right down to your very final tuning, one way or the other way, one flat makes a difference in how the car runs. So anyway, all right. My MGC GT is not starting consistently. Paul Morissette. Tony's on here. Tony's got an MGC also. 69 is not starting. I'll turn the key. The red light comes on. The fuel pump ticks a few times. Nothing else happens. I'll turn the key off. And those 68s and 69s, you can't just keep going at it. You got to turn the key all the way off. It's some stupid, just the way that they did them. Probably the federal government demanded a certain lockout there. Anyway, so I'll turn the key off and on a few times, and then eventually the car will start. do I need a new starter? Well, when you turn the car over to start, the starter motor is engaged. The solenoid, you can hear the solenoid click, and it spins over. If you'll always hear the click. You don't hear the click, there's some open circuit between the key switch. Those hardly ever go bad, but there's a jumble of wires right underneath the steering column, and the wire you're after is white with red. White with red. It goes into one of those Lucas female connectors. Then it goes down by the starter motor, and it comes out and goes back into another white with red, which runs around and is attached to a spade terminal and is attached to the starter motor. Now on an MGC, you can, no, you can't either. I think in a TR6. You can separate that wire down there, but you can hardly do that from on top. That was down there for a neutral safety switch for the automatic B's and C's that they made that were delivered in England only. But you can energize the white with red down there and see if the starter motor works. You can pull the lead off the starter motor, use a jumper wire, and pry that starter. But chances are that you've got a bad segment in the commutator, and every now and then the starter motor stops spinning with that bad segment lined up against a brush. So take the starter motor out, take it to your local repair, your local starter alternator repair shop. Those guys, the ones that are still in business, cut their teeth doing Lucas stuff 50 years ago. They still have parts. It's amazing. Sometimes you go in there and the guy goes, "Is this what you're after? There's another friggin' MGC starter on the shelf that he rebuilt, 13 years ago for somebody, and the guy never picked it up, or who knows? Did it for a B and doesn't fit a B, only fits a C. So who knows? Anyway, take it to your local shop. If you buy one in a box that says, I don't know, Lucas on it, it's not Lucas. It says Bosch, it's not really Bosch, it's a Lucas. And it was rebuilt in, I don't know, someplace. And no one cared whether it was rebuilt correctly or whether it works. So take it someplace, pay your local guy and have him do it. My gosh, it's 8:12. I'm just going to check the time. Let's see. So yes, I think you need a starter.
John, can I buy him for a minute?
Say again, Howard.
Can I just buy him because it's nearly quarter past one in the morning here. Last week you had someone with an Laycock overdrive that kept on jumping in and out.
Yes.
And he said the oil pressure was okay, the electrics were okay, and it sort of stumped you, and you were going to try and work out what it was. I was wondering if you come up with an answer. No. I asked him to contact Overdrive Services in Sheffield, and or John Esposito at Quantum Mechanics. I can't, except for that cone clutch. I just can't imagine what else it would be. There's a Sprague clutch in there that allows that keeps the rear flange from turning any slower than the main shaft, which is why if you're in overdrive, you can't engage it or it blows up that Sprague clutch. And that should at least carry the car at fourth gear speed, not overdrive speed. So the cone clutch is the only thing that I could imagine, But, it was complicated because, when he took it apart, there was fresh oil in the gearbox. So that means that whoever sold it to him dumped out all the little bits of fabric and all the crap that was caught in it, put fresh oil in it. Yeah, it's just fine. So I did not end up with an answer on that, Howard. So. Right, that's brilliant. I just want to be actually. I've been always listening to you, and also I sort of catch up and think, oh gosh, I remember that, and I don't remember that, and then.
I try not. If I don't know the answer. If I don't know the answer, I'll do the best I can. But it's like sometimes there's just I don't like string, like using a piece of string to align the front wheels. I never did it, you know. Done a lot of stuff, but I done that. The next one is my car is missing. We'll just, if you guys want to stay on, I'll stay on for as long as you want to stay on. My car is missing the center mechanism that supports the transmission. Do I need it? I'm not sure exactly. There's a cross member. On top of the cross member is a complex.
That's the part, John. It's that weird triangular with the bushing in the middle.
That keeps the ass end of the gearbox from hopping up and down. There's those two great big donuts.
Exactly. I don't have it. I never did. I just noticed last year that.
We're back to Paul Deershaw. Call him. He's got it. And get the, I mean, you can order some of that stuff new too, but that kind of stuff underneath the car. I mean, a good used one is just maybe better than a new one that's made in our favorite.
But what does it do? Because I've never had it.
Okay, well you got these mounts.
Yeah.
That keeps the gearbox from coming down.
Yeah.
And then you've got a bolt that's about that long, and it's got a rubber bushing top and bottom.
Yeah.
And that keeps the ass end of the gearbox from coming up.
Okay.
So it holds it all tightly from hopping up and down.
Okay.
John?
Thank you.
There's also a stabilizer bar.
Yeah, I have that.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
John?
Yes, George.
Getting back to that overdrive problem, wouldn't the fourth gear lockout, if it was worn or not properly adjusted, cause the dropout? If you just
it most certainly could, but what it would cause first,
shifter slightly,
what it would cause
drop out.
What it would cause first is it would cause the oil pressure to fall. And this guy, so cool, had an oil pressure gauge on the underside of the car. So he was watching that. So if the electrics fail, that in turn will cause the oil to lose your oil pressure. And the oil pressure then will allow it to return to direct drive. So the electrical part only controls the solenoid. The solenoid controls the oil pressure. So it's not the electrics. And if it had been any other question, I would have been right there. You know, wiggle the gear lever, see if that does it. That whole stuff. But he already had determined that the oil pressure was correct. So that's why I was so buffaloed and still am on that. It'll be interesting to find out what your knowledge is amazing. Thanks. Hey, Barry, thank you. Okay. John Tershak again. I took your class on suspension many years ago. I learned a lot. Over the years, I've seen weird things on SUs I've rebuilt. One was just lately. The piston had JB weld on it for extra weight. Usually you see the springs, you know, the spring is only 8 inches long, you know, if it's a red spring or a blue spring, you know, and it depends if it's an H2 or H4 carburetor. But usually when someone doesn't understand what's going on, they go, well, here, Ricky, not you, Rick. Let's pull the spring, and the spring ends up being 2 feet long, and they mash that thing in there, and that they get the downward force. So I don't think the weight was for a drop test, and I haven't seen that before. You know, the original carburetors were brass. The air pistons were brass. They were really heavy. So you can either get force, a downward force, with mass and gravity, or if brass becomes too expensive, and they went from brass to an aluminum piston with a steel insert. You see those on Bug-Eye Sprites. Those ran H1 carburetors. Those are like lawnmower carburetors. All the H carburetors begin at 1 inch, and an H1 is 1 1/8 inches. So it's 1/8 larger than 1 inch. And H2 is 2/8 larger than 1 inch or 1/4. And H4 is 4/8 or half an inch larger than 1, so that's 1.5. H6, 1 3/4. 8 HD8s, those are a full inch larger than an inch, or 2-inch throat, huge things. Anyway, they went from the brass piston to an aluminum piston with a steel insert in it to get the mass. And then someone said, you know, rather than screwing around and casting two metals together and all this hocus pocus, why don't we just put a spring in there? Springs are cheaper. So that's what you see now, and that the spring gives the downward force. So, but I've seen a lot of stuff. Seen a lot of interesting stuff. I have a whole PowerPoint presentation on used and broken parts. I mean, there's some stuff in there you look at and you go, what was that? It's just great, and it's like, how could this stuff happen? I've got a handbrake handle. I had a coach, football coach, great big massive guy, and he broke every rocker switch on his dash. And then he was handy, but he put he went in his basement and got switches that he should have used in his kid's bedroom and wired those up. So you got these home on-off switches dangling underneath the dash. Anyway, he not only broke all the rocker switches on his dash, he broke the handbrake handle. I mean, who can do that? The guy yanked up on it so hard, it's downstairs. I could bring it up next week. So anyway, let's see. So that's we run out to questions here. If anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask something here at the end, I'm happy to. I've been chattering a whole lot, so thank you.
Oh, hi, John. How are you doing? I have a question.
Okay, I see. I got to move a window here so I can see. This is Vince.
Yeah, Vincent Pacella from Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I met you about 4 years ago. I took your one-on-one Gearbox seminar class.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, at the Patterson
sure.
shop.
The Garage Mahal. That was it. That was the culmination of my
University Motors.
Yep.
Anyway, so basically I replaced the points and the condenser in the rotor. And the reason why I did that was because the car was kind of, I have a 68 Sprite actually, Mark IV. But
okay.
But the car was kind of running kind of crappy. Basically when you would accelerate from like starting in first gear, it would kind of hesitate and sputter. Like it kind of was, trying to, it was uneven, but then basically I replaced the points and the condenser and the rotor in it, and then I ran it, and then it actually ran better. It didn't have that problem anymore. And then probably a day or two later, there was a problem where the car had it wasn't really hesitating when you would accelerate, but when you would start from a stop, but it kind of had a problem where you would drive and you would try to accelerate through the gears. It kind of had a sputtery kind of hesitation, like a misfire. So I replaced the plug wires in the coil, not the coil, the plug wires in the spark plugs with the N9Ys, and I set the gap to 25 thousandths. But the plug wires in the plugs didn't fix the problem, so I then checked the coil, or the condenser, I'm sorry, not the coil, the condenser, and the condenser tested fine. The ohms increased. So I'm kind of stumbled on what the problem is. I did order a new rotor because I actually talked to some other guys on the MG Midget Sprite Facebook club page, and they said that it could be the newer rotors today. The modern rotors are not as they insulate a lot of the spark, it robs the spark. So I'm going to get a new rotor, but I'm kind of still don't know what the problem is. So I'm kind of maybe thinking timing might be the next.
That was going to be my question to you. What is the timing?
I haven't really checked. It's kind of
okay. All right. Okay. So you can either static time it at it's a 69 Sprite.
It's a 68 Sprite with the 1275 A series.
Yeah, and you got a vacuum advance on that distributor?
Yes, I do. It's got
Okay.
it's the Lucas 25D distributor.
Yep, because the 69s didn't have a vacuum advance. I think if you static time it at 10 degrees before,
Okay.
call me tomorrow. I'll tell you how to do it. It's in it's in your workshop manual. But the best thing to do, of course, is to get a timing light, dial back timing light, set it at 32 before at full mechanical advance. But 10 degrees static is going to get you real close there. Then the next thing is to put some real thick oil in the carburetors. I don't know what kind of oil you got in the carburetors now, but I love gear oil. Thick.
Okay. I guess I have some. Okay. I have 20W50 oil, or I could get some. I do have gear oil from the. Well, actually, no, I don't actually. I do have 20W50 though.
Well, you should have gear oil because you need it in the carburetors, the rack and pinion, your gearbox.
You know what? Actually, I do have some gear oil for the rack and pinion.
Right. I knew that. I knew that. That's why I said that. And the differential. So.
Okay. Right. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Right. And I did also want to let you know I did order a Unison carburetor Unison.
Yeah.
Anyway. Okay, I'll call you then to go over that further.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. See you later, Vincent.
See ya.
Tony, you got 6 cars. You got to have something wrong this week. Well, if no one else wants to weigh in, I'm going to unmute everybody, so we're going to get a whole lot of background noise.
John.
Hey, Tony.
Come here, Leanne.
And
good night, John.
Hey,
Leanne got the grease on the wire wheels.
Got the what?
Got to put the grease on the wire wheels on the C and fit them. Put the top-offs on.
Okay.
We're working on it. Good there.
I'll say good night, John.
Rob Emge, you're from like Oregon or something, aren't you?
Yeah, Northern California.
Yep.
John, I want to thank you very much for your help today.
Oh, wow.
Bob from California, I want to thank you very much for your help today, John.
John Hornsby.
I looked at my YouTube thing, or my PayPal thing. Well, thank you very much, too. Oh, my gosh.
Okay.
Well, thank you, John.
When's
the next Zoom meeting?
And Mike and
Yeah, thanks, John.
When's the next Zoom meeting?
Yep, next meeting, yep, let me just hit that again. The next meeting is May 9th. But I'll put it out on Facebook and on MG Experience. And if you're not a member of my Facebook page, just go on there. You know, I'm not going to say no, you know.
John, that's
I'm gonna let go.
John, June 9th, John.
I can't tell who's speaking.
June 9th, John.
Okay. Bill's got some noise on his.
John?
Yes.
June 9th.
June 9th, yes. What did I say, May?
Yeah, okay.
Obviously, I'm going to have one before next year. Thank you. Hey, Dave Hornby, how you doing?
Hey, how you doing, John?
Pretty good.
Hey, I missed it, John. I missed the first 5 minutes of your presentation, but you were talking about what Permatex and right stuff.
MG.
Yeah.
On the 2 side covers on the tappets, what should I put on there?
The right stuff. Permatex. The right stuff.
Okay.
Right now, yeah.
And I put it on the cover side and on the engine block side.
Both sides. Both on the side covers. On the side covers, both sides. Yep.
Oh, perfect. Thanks.
Okay.
Good to see you, John. See you in 2 weeks.
Yes. Okay. Actually, it's 3 weeks, I think, but
3 weeks.
Yep.
John.
Yep.
Great to be in for the first time.
So anyway, well, thanks everybody for coming in, and Lee, thank you for your nice note here, and oh, here we go. Here's one last note. It's on the chat, but it's Dale Brown from Windsor Says that he's got 3 MGBs. Says the last time you gave a hint on how to stabilize my tack by tapping on the glass, and it worked perfectly. There's often a dollar fix, you know? You always go for the easiest, cheapest stuff first. So all the tacks stick. They just, you know, I mean, spend $150 and it won't stick anymore, but send it off to Nicenger or something or other. But otherwise, you just give it a tap, just a quick tap, and just like the radio in your grandma's house, you know, you had to tap it on the top to make it work. So Bob MD, thank you very much, and Scott Lynn, 68 midget and a TD. Hey, how cool! Nice. I worked on my own MGA today, not much, but I put some dump tubes on the banjo. I use 3/16 brake line, seal line. It doesn't come apart quite as fast as soft copper. So.
Hey, John.
Yes.
John, you mentioned Paul Deershaw a couple times.
Yes.
How do you spell that last name?
All you have to remember is it's Paul.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's Paul. I'm gonna mute.
LAX at noon.
Nice. I'm gonna mute everybody just for a minute so you can hear me. But it's Paul Deershaw. It's a mouthful. DIERSCHOW. Paul Deershaw, and he runs a firm called Sports Car Craftsman.
Sports Car Craftsman.
CRAFTSMEN. Yes, and off my Rolodex, his phone number is 303
Yeah.
422
422. Okay.
9272.
Got it.
Make sure you tell him I told you to call.
I'll do it. Thank you.
So if nobody else has anything to weigh in on, we will call it for tonight. Vincent, you're going to call me tomorrow?
Yes, I will. Thank you again. I appreciate it.
Sometime afternoon.
Okay, afternoon, maybe around 2 or 1 or 2.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it'd be great. Right.
Okay. Cool.
Gentlemen, I didn't see any ladies tonight, but gentlemen, ladies, if there are any, and everyone else.
Thanks, John.
We got Crystal here, but chances are there's a guy behind Crystal's name.
Nope, hey girl.
Hey, good for you. Good. Hey, congratulations. It's always great. So,
John, could I check your phone number again?
My phone number is 616-307-6737.
Yeah, I had it wrong. Thanks.
All right. You can always call. If you call my old shop number, Mike still answers the phone. He'll send you here. I talked to a guy today. He says, "Well," he says, "I'm working on my MGB." He says, "I'm 91." It's like 91. So anyway, it'll the cars will provide entertainment for as long as you want to work on them. There's Mary down there with the bear. So we have 2 women tonight, Mary and Crystal. Yep. All right.
John, I just wanted to say you have a different definition of entertainment than I do.
Well, I'm not sure I'd call this entertainment. Well, of course it's entertainment. It's all entertainment. You know? So, that's what we said in the shop. When you walked into University Motors, it looked a lot like an automotive shop. I mean, give me a hint. I mean, there's cars and jacks and air compressors and tools and wrenches, but we were really in the entertainment business. And that's what it's all about. So there's no point in burning yourself up working on your car. There's no point in getting mad working on your car. Just everybody gets mad, and you do injure yourself. But take the precautions and do a nice clean job and do it thoroughly and do it right. And it just provides lots and lots of satisfaction. A lot of people judge him by the gray or no hair in the little postage stamp pictures of everybody on my screen. A lot of people are out of the workforce, but when you were in the workforce, lots of us were in some place caught in some sort of middle management, and you work all day, come up with the greatest idea in the world, pass it up, goes up the corporate ladder, and they go, no, we don't want to do it. That's defeating, or worse, they go, oh, we love it, and your boss takes credit for it. But you can go home and take the brass fitting off the front of your TD that takes the brake lines with the 3/8 BSF lines going into it. Take the bolt out the bottom, the 5/16 BSF bolt that holds it to the frame, and you walk over to the buffing wheel and you buff it all up, and it's bright and shiny. You put it back on and bleed it, and it works great. So it's just like mowing the lawn. It's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You do learn a lot with MGs, that's for sure.
I had over the course of I was working on a concrete floor in my Red Wing boots for 45 years, and over that course of time, I had about 100 something like 180 employees, and whether they left of their own volition or went back to school, or even if I fired them, most of them are still in contact, and there was so much. So many of these young guys. They said, we just learned so much, I mean, it's you can learn the difference between an imperial gallon and a U.S. gallon. You learn the different threads. You learn about working in a clean environment. You can watch me take an engine out with a white shirt on, and there's a couple of black marks on it. But when you begin, you're black from the top down to the bottom. Clothes, your hands, grease on everything. And how can you work so cleanly? But over a period of time, you just learn how to do that. Not to use your clothes as a rag, stuff like that, and how to wash your hands. Liquid Tide. I'll end here. Let me talk about how to wash your hands. We had a car in the shop one time. It was a 1929 Invicta, not like a Rolls Royce, great, huge, just a boat, just a huge, giant, gargantuan thing with a straight 6 Meadows engine with a magneto on one side and a distributor on the other. I mean, you couldn't stop it. It came with an owner's handbook, and in the very end of the handbook, it was how to wash your hands. But they were wrong. They didn't have Liquid Tide detergent. That and the scrub brush in the shower. It doesn't matter how much you work, you can clean your hands and they come out brilliant. If they get too dry, just put some lotion on them. But no point in having filthy hands when you have to do something else. Make dinner or attend to your spouse or something. So Liquid Tide. I'll close with that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very kindly.
Thank you, John.
And we'll look forward to seeing all of you
Thank you, John.
June 9th. See you later, Crystal. See you later, Mary.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, John.
Good night.